and bring my meetings and stuff to whoever's been there in that space. um, I'm looking forward to that.
Do
I
you
really
like
am.
Do you like Indian food?
Sure. Yeah. Sangams is a staple in our family.
You go to the buffet on Fridays?
Many times over the years. Yeah.
Okay.
My wife's a big fan as well, and our kids.
So, and let's talk a little bit I don't want to get, that's a deeper topic. Are you okay talking about the last election, how with you and your wife running simultaneously, or you?
It's 2 elections ago.
2 elections ago. Yeah, that's right.
Of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
of course.
We'll wait to get back on that too with the radio fam there. So, because that was an interesting moment,
It
right,
was
in the town. It was a
hilarious.
very interesting moment in the
It
town.
was
But you were
hilarious.
so real about it, I feel
was
like, even in that
hilarious.
situation, which I thought, like, obviously, like, I remember the sign at Alexander Farms and all that, right? Like, so
It was hilarious.
it's
yeah.
it's an interesting time in our town. We'll talk about budget a bit too. I have no doubt you have thoughts on it, and I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on transportation. Are there true things we can do to solve this transportation issue? Is it more? Well, let me ask you when we come back.
Yeah, it's probably another day, Justin. We should cover the
Spicy.
budget, and I want to thank these guys for running. I mean, it's a hell of a chore.
Yeah.
You know.
Good morning, LKN. 8:48. Good morning to you. It is election day. Today's the day where you get to make your voice heard. If you've ever complained about leadership, well, I don't want to hear you complain again if you don't vote. That's my rule. You can complain all you want as long as you vote. If you don't vote, you shouldn't be allowed to complain. The tech companies surely could get that data to know if you voted or not, and then they could big brother this thing and just shut all the complainers down. What about that? You think that works, Commissioner Gilroy?
Yeah, I mean, the voting, as you said, voting records are public, purely public, and so you want to be engaged,
Yeah.
right? You want to vote, and you want to be communicated with by the candidates, and voting is what gets you on the list for that.
It's a process to run for an office. Elections are tedious, I would say, even at a local level. What's been the biggest lesson you've learned on the election side of things?
It is hard work. It is hard work. And on the ballot today, as you know, is should we go to 4-year terms instead of 2-year terms? The answer is no. I think everybody should vote no on that. You really want 2-year terms so that you preserve this accountability.
Yeah. And that's specific to
people-
Cornelius
Yeah,
ballot.
yeah,
Yes.
Cornelius ballot, and people have to face the voters every 2 years. They have to answer questions. They have to be, accountable for the decisions they've made in the prior 2 years. They need to make new promises, right? Because it's a dynamic town and things change. The only reason why that question's on the ballot, candidly, is candidates are lazy. They'd rather not have to campaign every 2 years. 4 years sounds easier. And my hat's off. And we just can't do that, right? But my hat's off to the 10 candidates that are out there standing at the polls as we speak.
6:30 this morning. My
Because
gosh.
they've just wrapped up several weeks of a lot of work. Early voting is so important because, as we talked about, if only 10% of registered voters are going to vote, then so much of what you might do before voting starts. You could go stand at a shopping center, or you could go walk neighborhoods. You could go to events, and you could be super outgoing and go shake everybody's hand at the festival. But 9 times out of 10, you're not talking to a voter,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're just having a conversation with a neighbor or something, and they're just not going to vote. It just turns out they don't vote. And so the one thing you know about early voting is you're talking to a voter. And not only are you talking to a voter, you're talking to a voter like seconds before they vote, right? So you just have to be out there.
Yeah.
And that's what's excruciating about campaigning, and why a lot of these guys would love 4-year terms so they don't have to do it, is early voting is hours and hours and hours for days and days and days. And it just is tough.
Yeah, how do you
to
do any other
stand
work?
at the curb, right? You just have to do it. So, again, God bless the 10 folks that put their hat in the ring and are running for office. They've worked really hard. They're going to be standing out there, from 6:30 to 7 or 7:30 tonight, and they'll be very, very glad when it's over. To answer your question, though, I'm not a super outgoing guy. I'm not the kind of extrovert that you are, Justin. That's just not in my DNA. I'm not super social, but I was surprised by how much I enjoyed what happens on a campaign, especially in the early days when I didn't know a lot of people, I wasn't known, and you just get you just get pulled into these conversations with anybody, anytime, anywhere, because we all share the community, right? And we all share what's going on with our town and how it impacts our quality of life. So that was fun because I do enjoy meeting new people and having conversations over the issues.
Do you
So.
think Cornelius still maintains reasonableness in conversations, or at times has it seemed so visceral that it's an
You
issue?
know, because of as I just said, I'm not a natural social media guy, so I haven't been around Facebook since the last election cycle. So I don't know. I mean, you tell me, what does it look like in the last 6 or 8 weeks? I
Oh, I'm
mean,
not running for office, so I can go eat at a
because
restaurant and have no issue.
that's where it gets tough,
Yeah,
right? It's not so much the interactions in person because
yeah.
people conduct themselves in a different way
Keyboard
when they're
warriors.
in the room. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So you'd have to go out and see what the level of vitriol looks like on social media. It doesn't feel to me as contentious, perhaps,
Right.
as it has in the past. 2 years ago, we had the the situation where the incumbent board had just gone out of their shoes approving high density residential. I mean, they were just maniacal about it, and it was all within the last 6 or 9 months prior to the election. A lot of approvals that made zero sense, right? And so it was fairly easy for a group of us to come together and point that out, and so we flipped that board entirely. So that was a little bit, as I recall, that was a little bit controversial because there was a real issue at stake. Are we going to keep building apartment complexes as far as the eye can see in every direction, and basically ruin our quality of life here over the next 10 or 20 years, or are we going to be more careful about it? And so we are now.
Circling back then, and this going with participation, during the previous segment, we started talking about the Bailey Road Flex Space Industrial Project.
Yeah.
And how do you balance the needs of the community, the rights of the property owner, adjacent properties? I mean, that is a
Well,
classic
here
example.
is what's so tough about it. Bailey's Glen, right, is a very specific kind of community, right? It's an age restricted community. It's close knit. My mom lives there, right? I own a house there. It's a community that not everybody has been here for a long time, right? They may have moved here to retire in their last stages of life, perhaps, and I think what happened is they got super riled up, right? A resident there had run our parks department in the past, was and super guy Paul. He's just a real evangelist for parks and rec, as he should be. He ran the department
Sure.
for many years.
Yeah.
He, I think, sort of envisioned that there might be a park there instead of this business campus, right? And so got the community to write 100 emails and
Isn't there a park across the street?
yeah, there is. It's a big
Interesting.
one.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
And there will not be
Yeah.
a park across the street from the park that's already there.
Yeah.
And so, I love Paul, but it probably got the conversation in the community probably got a little distorted. And because hey, it's an election year on top of everything, right?
Yeah.
So 100 emails from people who are going to be single issue voters gets the candidate's attention. And so
Oh, yeah.
that night it went down. It went down 3-2 to everybody's shock.
Yeah.
Everybody's shock, right? Because I think they just were, hey, the election's a month from now. How am I voting here, right? And what I worry about, and I wasn't there that night, but what I worry about the most is, that's a parcel where if Paul and Bailey's Glen say, we don't want this business campus, although, God, again, I don't think they'd even notice it when it was
Right.
there, if it were there, right? We'd rather, feels like it ought to be residential, we got a park there, then they might get what they want. They might get a 450 unit apartment complex there.
Wow. Looking forward to
And
that
if we
one.
come back 5 or 6 years and that's what was proposed, and the board at the time said, hey, guys, you can't complain now. You told us back in 2023 you wanted residential. Then that's going to be tough, right? That's going to be tough because that will clog up the roads around there like you cannot imagine. and the pressure that puts on
Not to mention
town
the
spending.
schools. Everything, that road, that corridor.
And I worry that we're all, not just the town, but the communities right around that area are going to someday rue the day that they didn't have, a quiet little business park there. But we'll see what happens.
What's been like your most exciting moment when you think back over your time as a town board commissioner? Like recall for me a story where you were like, I'm supposed to be here right now. This is good.
I'm not going to be able to come up with one, Justin.
You
This
don't
is
have
government.
one? You
This
got
is government,
one.
man.
Come
I mean, there are long hours. There are long days. and
You
long
enjoy the
hours.
game though. You enjoy the game.
People think this is some kind of a job. It's not. It's 2 nights. It's 2 nights a month, right? And then there's a lot of meetings and communications in between. So it's a commitment. But we all have day jobs. I do remember the days before the Great Recession. In that 07, 08 time period when the pressures on growth were, immense, right? You can't even imagine versus today. And I remember being there at 1 o'clock in the morning sometimes, even later. And, Gary Knox was the mayor at the time. And, Gary's a developer. He's a real estate professional, right?
Yeah.
And so he had such passion for, we'd be looking at our 4th project of the night, right, for approval somewhere in the process. And Gary would be sitting there talking about the details in such your eyes would just glaze over because he'd be worried about whether the BMP ought to be 20 feet to the left or the right, and it's 1:30 in the morning.
That really gets the town board going right there. That's the good stuff.
So there are moments like that. But no, I think that's probably why you see me on the football field and the basketball court. Is because probably it is a little more fun, Justin, than local government.
Well, it's been an honor and a privilege for me to see your willingness to have a different kind of voice. You say you're an introvert, which you might be right out and about, but as it relates to local government, you have never shied away from being honest with your thoughts and process and beliefs and reasoning why. I will say that people can disagree with you all day, and that's fine. We're allowed to have different opinions, but at least you backed up your statements with some quantifiable data. And I think that's what we need to get back to. How can we quantify these decisions we're making, if at all possible? Not everything can be quantified, right? We have to have some belief and faith and a vision for going forward, but to actually know what you're getting and to research, that's what I want to encourage everyone to do. Again, it's election day. Get out and vote. This is your opportunity to make your voice heard locally. Commissioner Gilroy, I appreciate you.
One more comment?
Real quick, you got 10 seconds.
So I've been on the show twice trying to talk about spending and taxes, and I'm yet to talk about spending and taxes
next
in any
week.
detail.
Next week,
or at least
Gilroy.
the next budget cycle.
That's
okay?
right. There we go. Commissioner Gilroy, thanks. Good morning, fam. We'll see you tomorrow.
The news.